Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, humanity would have been the recipient of an apocalyptic-style event scenario. Perhaps I run the risk of sounding somewhat like a broken record, as the saying goes, but nevertheless, this would be the experiential view I received that night. That which is experienced in creation is according to what each individual decides, that either through the formulation of ideas via the body vehicles or agreement with ideas as created by others, so these ideas are installed into a consciousness, much like programs of data that dictate the computer games we may elect to play, consciousness then effecting body forms which decode these data-like program ideas into a simulation we then experience. Where it comes to the overall experience that is an entire species, even as each individual participant will have their own unique consciousness construct, to play the game that is the human experience as an example, so the idea template that is effecting the human game must be taken on and consciousness incorporated. The equivalent of uploading a certain file of data information to our computers that allows us to play a certain game, the same file then that all other participants of the chosen game also will have incorporated into their computers. As the ideas that are the human experience are now a part of the consciousness of all choosing to play the game of humanity, this then formulates a collective species consciousness. For within the confines of the human experience, as each participant is a part of the overall consciousness that effects it, that which each individual decides will be additional ideas that become as a part of the collective consciousness, and therefore part of the affected overall experience to whatever extent that may be. That the greater proportion of humans then that create or agree with the same idea, this then has a greater impact on the overall human consciousness, and the more apparent will the effect be as experience for humanity in its entirety. And so it is that just as individuals decide their experience based on a consciousness construct by their design, this would be so for an entire species. But as I mentioned, all according to the percentages is the dictation of a change of effect alteration experienced on whatever global, all humanity encompassing level that it is. For the dark force controllers to advance their agendas for human enslavement, these are ideas that must be human consciousness installed in addition to the foundation of already agreed to control that is the human experience. And were only certain percentages to be in agreement, so only a certain proportion of overall humanity will be the recipient of these additional controlling measures. And we can see today how although the human race is an enslaved species, there is quite the variation of subjugation and restriction prevalent from one area of the globe to another, that the controllers wish now to depopulate and even exact complete genocide of humanity, as the desire is for this to be an all-encompassing, complete humanity effect, so the idea agreements in relation to such must be installed within every human participant, that it becomes as complete an agreement in overall human consciousness as possible. This is achievable primarily through a consciousness idea insertion via programming, as made possible by the technologies, the television and computer games as primary examples. For where we can't experience anything absent of the idea of it, and as we indulge in that which is portrayed in the movies and TV series, the ideas that are affecting that which we are indulging must be consciousness implanted. And as a species such as humanity is predominantly a consciousness and personal self immersed and embracing, as everything experienced is retained as ideas in consciousness, so every idea that affected every simulated situation is effectively clung to, and the effects in relation to these ideas will follow at some stage. For the idea themes, as portrayed on the screens, will be consciousness implanted then as readily as were they actual simulated events occurring in our physical level experiences. The technologies then are a viable mechanism of having humanity as a species install certain idea themes the controllers desire to become as a physical level situations. As I said, the greater proportion of humans accepting the same idea programming, the more this becomes absolute as an idea in overall human consciousness, with the less uncontrolled idea variables and alternatives to that which the controllers wish to become as humanity's overall experience. Humanity will be bombarded then with all manner of apocalyptic, human annihilating movies and TV series ideas, for although every idea that is a consciousness installed is in effect now in reality, through the design of consciousness, only certain of the ideas will be affected at any given moment, the ideas held in a current prominence. For the human experience to change, so must the current state of affairs, the ideas effecting such also be altered, that alternative ideas effecting the desired change assume the prominent held to position within consciousness. That effects are not immediately manifested from the causes, physical level wise, the ideas must be held to in prominence to their effect conclusion to become physical level actualized, and should another idea take prominence, prior to the effect culmination point. It is the equivalent of exchanging a movie for another before the end has been reached. The controllers then are installing as many ideas of a depopulating nature into human consciousness as possible to maximize the chances that at least one of them will stick, will be held to in prominence and long enough to be physical level affected, and over the years I have been chronicling all the idea potentialities, and which becomes as human overall experience, be they the dark force apocalyptic ideas, or those of a more beneficial nature, such as the alien armada, is according to what humanity, the overall consciousness that it is, decides. As I said in the beginning, humanity as a species had suffered a global cataclysmic event which had rendered the planet into an apocalyptic state of affairs. Severe depopulation, and those that had survived, as this wasn't a complete extinction event, were subsisting on what supplies and resources remained. With this as the overall scene, I would find myself now within a vast dimly lit building, in the company of several hundred or so human individuals by my estimation. We would all now mingle and select those we desired to be grouped with, the groups numbering 3 or 4 generally. I would be grouped with the 2 others, 2 human men, though my personal self had no recognition as to who they were, nor were real awareness impressions afforded that would shed any light on their identities. The situation seemed to be so that we all were temporarily placed in this particular creational position and set to be inserted into the apocalyptic scenario that was the human experience, as I have previously revealed as being in effect. For oftentimes we may observe real side situations from an aside from the simulation real awareness view, but where necessary, so we may latch onto the ideas that we are their effects, and inserted as a simulated form to animate through within the experience, where engaging with all participants or anything else that features is now possible. This would seem to be the case here, as though this large building was a position of preparation, and where all involved were grouped up and to be inserted into the apocalyptic human scenario, for whatever reason this may be, as though all were deployed for certain assignments and operations within what was one of humanity's potential physical future events. And now the building would fade, my group and myself present within the devastation that were the remnants of human civilization, that although nothing would be revealed as to the cause, an effective means had evidently been delivered where the experience, that is humanity, would have been decimated. Nothing would be known as to the operations of the other groups, and indeed my own group would become somewhat lost in the idea that was the apocalyptic scenario, as though absorbed into it, and losing all objectivity, forgetting whatever function they were inserted into the situation for. For it is so that we can lose ourselves in the experiences, and including those where we are deployed for assignments, as readily as we can in creation overall. We can take on the consideration that the fabrication of the simulation is real, and this then becomes our reality if we indulge from the position of the personal self, and remove ourselves from our real awareness positions of creational indifference. As I said, this seemed to be the case with those of my group, and for the duration of this real side experience, and insertion into this particular humanity potential event scenario, they would be absorbed into it, and would operate just as the other human surviving participants would, securing a suitable spot, scavenging for supplies, etc., and I then would abandon my group and proceed alone. Up until this moment, I would have no personal self-inkling as to my purpose, my objective, though retaining my real awareness standing. So was the real awareness then orchestrating the actions of the simulation inserted body form, as opposed to becoming absorbed into the situation where we would assume a standing as the personal self, and then rather just floundering about within the experience aimlessly. It seemed I was to make contact with a particular individual present within this overall idea scenario. If he was a part of humanity, and therefore fated to be caught up in the effects as shared by the human species, with this apocalyptic event as but one potentiality, or if inserted into the idea-affecting event as I and the others of the group and within the building wasn't made apparent, but regardless, I would establish a contact as was my objective seemingly, and the scene would fade. Overall, the human apocalyptic event still was in effect, but just like with the building from earlier, I now was removed from it, as though operating in a position slightly out of phase with it, as though a dimension in a close frequency proximity with the human experience, but one that wasn't a part of it. The man I had made contact with would bring me into the midst of a group of individuals that presented as though a kind of a magical order. Ultimately they desired my assistance, but it appeared I had to undertake a series of tests, or trials if you will, that if successful, not only would I be accepted among them, but have approved my worth and considered then the right individual for the assistance they required. For it is so that as we operate on the real side, from our nowness, real awareness positions, as the real awareness is a part of the isness everything reality, there is no limit to the abilities of the real awareness in regards to the simulation inserted forms it animates through. For being an everything reality, there is nothing the real awareness cannot do. What limits the effectiveness of the real awareness is the interjection of the personal self, and the limitations are present as a consciousness held to idea agreement restrictions. As such, other beings operating multi-dimensionally will bear witness to the unlimited way by which we operate, and on occasion we may be approached by others to assist them with that which they cannot achieve themselves, due to whatever ideas they hold to that limit their abilities in regards to what they desire to be exacted. And I have shared a number of previous real-side experiences in regards to my undertaking assignments and operations on behalf of others. Naturally, it pays to determine the intent of those we assist, but as we help others, generally this will be reciprocated, and this way we can build up quite the array of allies and connections that may in turn assist us with our galactic endeavours and projects. The tests as presented by the magical order made little sense simulation-wise to the personal self. They seemed to comprise of being inserted into certain chambers and of my creating thought forms in response to sets of telepathically received questions. Some stages of the tests were completely nonsensical to the personal self, and so were beyond my ability to describe, other than what they were for the purposes of, to afford a proof as to the capability that evidently had been previously demonstrated and witnessed through my other real side activities. The magical group were humanoid, though their forms were never static, seemingly always in flux and alternating, and the leader of their order would be more so a presence than an actual relatable form. He would be in communication with me also throughout, and indeed would be the one posing the questions telepathically that I was to answer to his satisfaction. Interestingly, I would recollect that I had experienced this series of tests before, on 2 prior occasions in fact, on previous real side experiences, though ones I would have received in the early teens of my current human lifetime, and with this same magical group. Although there were slight differences in the nature of the tests, as though they had developed since these previous experiences, but just as it was back then, so I would complete the tasks, most just as nonsensical and indescribable as they always had been. For back then, in my teenage years, completing these tasks as set by the magical sect and their leader had been in conjunction with my accessing a kind of tower, and as I ascended it, so I would be progressing through as though stages and sections of it, and besting the monsters that presented as guardians of each segment. In this most recent version of my interaction with the magical order, and on completion of their tests and trials, instead of my ascending the Tower of Monsters, as I proved my abilities once again to their satisfaction, so the assistance they actually required was in relation to the rescue of certain individuals, that they were unable to liberate themselves, as magically adept as they were. For individuals can develop themselves in any way they desire, all according to the design of their consciousness, but as I mentioned, the real awareness, absent of a personal self-interjection and the restrictions as opposed through it, is unlimited in its capability, and I was agreeable to provide the rescue assistance the magical order required of me. As I mentioned, the position I was in with the magical order was of a dimension slightly removed from the physical level Earth, and whatever is transpiring there moment by moment, and in this instance so was the apocalyptic situation in effect as the human overall experience. A dimension slightly removed from the Earth, but close enough in frequency terms that interaction between the two was viable, and it seemed I was tasked with extracting particular humans, caught up in the apocalyptic event, from the dire situation they shared with humanity, and pull them through to the dimension the magical order operated from. That the magical order and their leader were unable to accomplish this, and those they desired rescued unable to improve their own creational circumstances, suggested my real awareness could determine then whatever was required that their extraction be possible. That as everything experienced is based on consciousness idea installation, overall this relocating of the target humans required a redistribution of the ideas that were affecting their current circumstances as a part of the human apocalyptic scenario, that the real awareness would then proceed to handle as to the particulars. Visually this presented as my pushing my hand through as though the boundary of the dimension I was in, and inserting my arm up to the shoulder within the dimension that was the physical level Earth, and where I would as though rummage around within the Earth physical experience until I located each human I was to find. I then would close my hand around them as though my hand were giant in relation to their body forms, pulling them through to the dimension where the magical order resided, and where each extracted human then was liberated from their human physical level apocalyptic predicament. There was a something that set these rescued humans apart from all others of the human race that I couldn't quite quantify or determine, as though they were somewhat unique and were of special significance. And interestingly, every time I inserted my hand into the physical earth dimension, I would never have a visual of the earth, as though the boundary of the dimension I was operating within denied the ability to see through it, only the realization that the physical earth was the dimension I was accessing. And for the duration that my hand and arm remained inserted, so I would have the sensation of extreme cold, and a numbness that would continue to intensify until I had the target human in my grasp and they were pulled through. There the experience would end. I had completed that which the magical group had requested of me, extraction of individuals deemed of value, and that impressions revealed were indeed of significance in some way, from what was another potential overall human apocalyptic scenario. And as this would be in actuality the third time I had had dealings with this magical order, it seems I have developed a connection with them, and perhaps they may indeed reciprocate and be of assistance with our galactic endeavours at some stage. I have shared on previous real side experiences that always there are options for those who do not resign themselves utterly to the overall human consciousness program, achieved generally through an awareness process which involves a releasing of all consciousness ideas, a human consciousness which as things currently stand is festooned with potential species depopulation event ideas, that although such may not come to pass, as what transpires as human experience is a subject ultimately to what humanity decides collectively, this experience would reveal one possible form that physical level Earth extraction may take, among the other options that I have previously shared, alien relocation and rescue efforts and so forth.
And that's really cool. What I see also from Kevin's experience is that because Kevin has certain abilities, he's sent on assignments to mingle with these different groups and whatever, and they see that he has abilities too, just like joining a psychic group or something like that. And at the same time, he can add to what we're doing, the new you and whatever, seeing that, he's like a real person. He's not just somebody coming up. So it's kind of like, coming up and talking to them saying, wow, you guys got psychic, you guys got magic abilities. And it's the same here, getting to people in the physical. In other words, if you're a politician and you're, say, running for president or whatever, say you're somebody, you can mingle with all the others. But if you're just part of the audience, well, they just wave to you and walk by, you see. So again, this is where as you become more aware and you decide something to do, to mingle in a certain way with others, that you're more accepted as to what you're telling them about what we're doing. You see, this is what's very important, instead of just sitting there and doing nothing. So again, I suggest everyone take a look at what is possible to do. And I've always been out in the public. I like that too. And one of the things is that as Peter has come here, Peter Adams, he has walked around and talked to so many people and gathered ideas and shared and even sang the new you with them out there. So again, this is what we've done too. We've met so many people, Val and I, here through the years. And I've always done this, even when wherever I went, to the beach, when camping, when just different places, or my general lifestyle, I was always out there approaching the public in certain ways. Now, there's many, many creative ways that you can do this, which are really fun. And yeah, it's dangerous. You're going to be hated, whatever. Well, that's how it is. Okay, that's the world, but the world's dying. And so, again, this is how we all become more aware. We forget ourselves and we do something for others because this is how life is.